The Chinese Navy is steaming towards the Syrian coast in the Mediterranean Sea. The Russian Navy is already there, as is the Russian Air Force and a substantial number of Russian special forces and other specialists. At the same time, Theresa May and Donald Trump, a man you are all calling a certifiable madman and criminal who should be locked up, and President Macron are about to cry havoc and unleash the dogs of war on Syria. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything, anything. It could be the end. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962-63. I know what it's like to be lying in bed wondering if the world is going to come to an end. Now, if we're very lucky, the conflict that is about to flare up in a tiny Arab country on the Mediterranean will be of limited duration and scope, with only high-powered conventional weapons attached to the cruise missiles that will very soon be flying. But if one side suffers any great disadvantage, the danger of a switch to tactical nuclear weapons leading ineluctably to an exchange of medium range and then potentially intercontinental ballistic nuclear warfare is there. This is the most dangerous moment since the Cuban Missile Crisis when I was a small boy. Hyperbole? Well, let's hope so, but it's what I believe, and I have a long track record of being right, and the people telling you otherwise have an equally long track record of being absolutely wrong. Not that it stops them, of course, and not that it stops some of the sheeple from baaing and running like Pavlov's dogs to the side of the Western war machines. You're going to hear stuff tonight that you're not going to hear anywhere else, which makes it all the more precious. Trust me on this, dear listeners. What I'm saying to you tonight will be a cut out and keep. You will play it back to yourselves if we're still alive in years to come and say, Galloway was right again. Blair, Trump and May were wrong, and it all led to a bloody disaster, because that's the track that we are on. Let me just go back to first principles. I disagree with the news bulletin you've just heard. Syria and Russia do not deny that the Syrian regime carried out the chemical weapons attack in Douma. Syria and Russia deny that there was any chemical weapons attack in Douma by anybody. And guess what? There is absolutely zero evidence that any chemical weapons attack took place. The Red Cross, those well-known Bolsheviks, have found no trace of any chemical weapon residue in the soil and other samples that they took yesterday and today. The Red Crescent, ditto. The Russian army, ditto. The Syrian army, ditto. Independent war correspondents, ditto. I've been watching film all day of people walking around without masks, without even covering their mouths and nose, not an NBC suit in sight, in an area that we have been told was the site of a devastating chemical weapons attack. Remember, you heard it from me here. It is a lie, and a lie from the same stable that told you we had to invade and occupy Iraq because that country was bristling with weapons of mass destruction, which at 45 minutes' notice could rain down on you and me, or at least on our military base in Cyprus. 45 minutes. That's what Tony Blair said. Tony Blair said today that we must go to war with Syria and we must not put it to Parliament to vote on it. This from a man who's openly campaigning to overturn the result of a British referendum on EU membership, who claims that Parliament must be the supreme body on deciding on the terms of Brexit, says that Parliament does not have to be consulted before entering what could turn out to be World War III. Let me make some predictions to you. I heard, as some of you might, because it was on TalkSport News, not somewhere that the Emir of Qatar frequently appears, but then who knew that the Emir of Qatar, a petrol station masquerading as a country, even could speak? He certainly can't run for election, of course, because he's the Emir for life, unless one of his family stab him in the back like all the other members of his family have stabbed all the other members of their family in the back. He said he'd just been on the phone to President Trump and that they had seen eye to eye. Must have been FaceTime. What a pleasure. These two ogres talking to each other on FaceTime. And the Emir said that they had seen eye to eye and had agreed on what must happen next. And what must happen next, he inferred, implied, more or less stated, was a full-scale, full-on regime change war on Syria. As I said at the beginning, what could possibly go wrong? They've tried that, you see, in Iraq, and they tried it in Libya. And it led to the disaster that every one of you already knows and doesn't need me to adumbrate, though it would appear our media and political class have entirely forgotten all about it. But here's the difference, dear listeners. Nobody stood behind Iraq. Nobody stood behind Libya. In Syria, Russia, China, Iran, and its allies will stand firm against the coming United States, Great Britain, France attack on Syria. Now, you may be sanguine about that. I am not. I have seen war. I've been in war. I've been lying on the ground, pressing my nose into the earth, hoping that I could somehow sink a centimetre lower as bombs fragmented and swirled all around me, slicing human beings to pieces right in front of my eyes. In fact, I was travelling with an ITN news crew who, when we stood up, were able to film the dying children. I know what this is going to be like, and I know it's going to be hell on earth. And why is it being done? To avenge what they claim is 40 dead people. So you're going to kill thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Syrians to avenge 40 dead Syrians? Now, there are Syrians dying in large numbers every day because there's a full-scale war going on in Syria between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and all the other Jayshes, the alphabet soup of Syrian and international Islamist fanaticism. That's true. And some very, very melancholy, lamentable, sad, disgraceful, and outrageous and atrocious things have happened in the course of that war. One of the reasons why there are no Western journalists in Douma is because the journalists wouldn't need their hats on the way back home. I remind you that Syria and Russia are fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda and their ilk, the people who sliced the throats of British journalists on video, the people who crucified Christians outside their churches before destroying them, the people who burned people alive in cages, the people who drowned people alive in cages, the people who have plumbed depths that even the Nazis did not plumb. Perhaps technology has just moved on. And you'll recall, because I told you about it so many times, how one of these moderate Syrian rebels filmed himself cutting out the heart and the liver of a captive and eating it on camera for the edification of his friends and followers. That's what's happening in Syria. That's what was happening in Iraq. And Britain and America killed, slaughtered 10,000 Iraqi civilians. 10,000. Not 40, 10,000 Iraqi civilians, many of them women and children, in the liberation of Mosul from exactly the same ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the alphabet soup of fanatic extremism. So spare me your sanctimony. Spare me your hypocrisy. Ye who send weapons to Saudi Arabia to massacre Yemeni children by the hundreds every day, but you're going to confront Russia and China over 40 dead people in Douma? Really? Well, look, if you believe the Skripal narrative, you probably have already swallowed the Kool-Aid on the coming war with Iraq. If it wasn't for the fact that so many innocent people will die, and some of them will be service personnel from our own country too, then I'd say go right ahead. I really would. I'm so filled with rage, I really would say go right ahead, because you are entering the gates of hell and you will be incinerated in it. The problem is, so will a lot of other people. It's the mother of all talk shows.